The fabled archetype, known as demon raw gods, Manganshin in the OCG and as fiend raw deities in some video games, they're an archetype of light fiend monsters, with the exception of the fabled, who are known as demon raw god beasts in the OCG, and are beast monsters. They began in Japan as dual terminal promos in dual terminal Demon Raw God Revival and continued in dual terminal Champion of Chaos. Their effects focus on discarding cards from their controller's hand to the graveyard to activate their effects. Fable monsters are depicted in a manner as to display both a hallowed aspect to them and a bit of whimsy. However, overall their art is meant to give the impression of a slanted kind of twisted, be it demonic or cynical. All of them are light monsters and are believed to represent heterodoxy, perverse versions of light, and degradation from grace and dignity, with some resembling the archetypal fallen angels from the Bible. They all have masks which makes them resemble monsters of certain Spanish legends. Tiny, colourful and malicious imps often accompany monsters in their background art. In terms of the playstyle, they are similar to the Dark World archetype in that the monsters thrive off of effects that discard. However, unlike a Dark World, all Fable monsters will benefit off of any discard, even for cost. Even though cards like Dark World Dealers can be used with Fable monsters, it's best to keep a high monster count and use their own effects to special summon them. The archetype also greatly benefits from cards such as Tour Guide from the Underworld, which gets Kushinano to the grave as quickly as possible and sets up for rank 3 Exceeds monsters such as Levia the Sea Dragon and number 17 Leviathan Dragon. Though these Exceeds support the deck, the main focus is synchros such as Fabled Writing, Formula Synchro and TC Hyper Librarian, in order to maintain the card advantages lost by summoning those monsters. Fable decks can be very versatile because of their potential to abuse special summons and also being a light fiend archetype. There are a lot of cards to support them. The key to a successful deck is to control the field while slowly gaining advantage for powerful finish. Beckoning Light is by far the best tool in Fable Arsenal. It lets you discard your Fable monsters whilst getting others from your graveyard. You can send Fable monsters from the deck to the graveyard by using Light Swarm monsters, Card Trooper and Foolish Burial. Both Phoenix Wing Windblast and Raigeki Break are already very handy for this deck, letting you disrupt your opponent's plays and discard a Fabled monster. By combining them with the Fabled Capsith, you get a powerful removal tool. Tool Guide from the Underworld lets you get Fabled Kushano for Xyz summons, setting up the graveyard with both Fabled Kushano for its effect and Dark monsters for Chaos monsters. As Fabled monsters can swarm the field without using up your normal summon, and because they lack good destructive plays, it's a good choice to add cards such as Chaos the Shadow Monarch to remove the opponent's cards while getting a monster with good attack, which can be later used as a synchro material, and Dark for Chaos support. You can go further and add Riser the Storm Monarch to combine it with Phoenix Wing Wingblast. Your keys to stop your opponent's OTK are Gauze the Emissary of Darkness, Tragodia, and Battlefader. Just like Chaos the Shadow Monarch, they are dark and can be used as a synchro material. Being a light monster benefit from Shining Angel and Honest, which can be returned from the graveyard by Beckoning Light. Another way around is to add TG Engine, which is a combination of Tech Genus Warwolf and a Tech Genus Striker, and focus on a beast support like Horn of the Phantom Beast to make a good use of the Fabled sub-archetype. To benefit from Fabled monsters that remain in the graveyard, you could add incredibly offensive and defensive cards, such as Seraphim the Ultimate Time Lord, as more than 10 monsters in the graveyard is a piece of cake for this deck. There are fiend monsters such as Snipe Hunter and Stygian Street Patrol, which then help you swarm the field after summoning these stronger monsters. With the changes brought by Link monsters and Master Rule 4, the sheer swarming ability of this archetype allows for rapid Link and Synchro summons. As time goes on, more Link monsters will be printed that indirectly support Fable cards. Firewall Dragon provides an effective beta with a rather impressive recursion effect if you set up your Link summons carefully. Orlo Dragon is a hefty boss monster that is easy to summon thanks to the Fabled Nezuchi and other effects. Topologic Bomber Dragon can give you repeated destruction effects. VLAN Hydra provides fodder to fuel more Link summons without investing too many Fable monsters and potentially many more. The Raging Turbo deck is a deck that makes use of the effect of Fabled Raging to draw cards. Because its effect allows its controller to draw up to 2 cards, a deck that can use cards quickly or set a large number of cards to generate later card advantage is important. The main way to summon is to discard the Fabled Cerebral and Fabled Garnatia with the effect of the Fabled Chalwa, and to normal summon a second one. This deck has potential to create an OTK with synchro summons. In terms of its weaknesses, Silent Graveyard, Soul Drain, and the end of the Anubis alone can severely slice into Fables, because such monsters whose effects activate when discarded transpire while they're in the graveyard. This archetype's attribute of light can also be capitalized on via Light Imprisoning Mirror, the Allies of Justice, and some of the Kawaki Merus. A substantial count of Fables on the roster also have superficial attack, making them prey for cards like King Tiger Wangu and Deck Devastation Virus, which can plug up synchro summons by putting away key tuners like Severol, Ruby Ruda, and Chawa. Skill Drain and Mind Drain can be used against any Fables with effects that respectively activate on the field or in the hand, such as Grimro and Nozuchi in the hand. Protector of the Sanctuary can also cease Fable Region's one-time draw replenish, as well as any Fables that can search other Fables from the deck. This can be coupled with drop-off and drastic drop-off to further encumber their use, provided that aforementioned cards such as Light Imprisoning Mirror and Soul or Mind Drain are active so that the Fables can't spring their effects when discarded. Return if any of the said grave interdictors aren't active can also stall and shun Cruise and Leviathan's graveyard salvages by forcing the retrieved cards back into the deck. Goblin of Greed can also impede Fables because it will restrict them from being discarded at a cost, hence making it more laborious to use them. Here we'll start covering what these cards do. Fabled and Wrath is a light attribute fiend type synchro effect monster. It's a level 6 with 2400 attack and 1900 effects. It requires a Fabled tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters. If this card is special summoned, your opponent can discard one card to negate this effect, otherwise you can draw 2 cards, then discard 1 card. If a monster is sent from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, except during damage step, you can target one of those monsters, special summon it to your field, but negate its effects. You can only use each effect of Fabled and Wraith once per turn. This card seems very easy to summon. It's just a straight level 6, so long as you've got a Fabled tuner. The non-tuner monsters required are generic, and so you can be splashed into multiple styles of decks. As soon as this card is special, so it can either be through its initial synchro summon, or being revived from the graveyard, your opponent can then discard 1 card to negate an effect, otherwise you get to just straight away draw 2 cards. Then one of those cards gets discarded, but the discard on a Fabled monster will provide you with additional forms of advantage. If a monster is sent from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, except during a damage step, so actually if they choose to negate this card's effect, they will discard a card. Hopefully for them it's not a monster, but if they haven't read into this card and they discard a monster, then you can target one of those monsters and that gets special summoned straight to your field, so you can use their monster against them. Fable Ashenvel is a light attribute fiend type level 4 with 1600 attack and 1200 defense. Once per battle, if this card battles during damage calculation, as a quick effect you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. This card gains 600 attack during that damage calculation only. It's a small boost to your attack points to make this a 2200 attack monster, and it can be activated either during yours or your opponent's turn, so it can be in response to your opponent's attack, or you can be making that attack declaration yourself. The discard isn't much of a cost, as the Fabled monsters will recover themselves through this effect, and it's a decent level 4 body to have on the field. Fabled Dynera is a light attribute fiend type effect monster, level 8 with 2800 attack and 100 defense. You can attribute summon this card in a face-up attack position by attributing 1 Fabled monster. Once per turn, the first opponent's normal spell card effect to resolve becomes your opponent discards 1 card. This is similar in the effect of Malicious Edge, as you can tribute over 1 monster to bring that card out. That means you're getting rid of 1 card rather than the 2, which would typically be for a level 8 monster. The other bit of its effect simply forces your opponent's first normal spell card to be wasted, as it becomes a discard from your hand, which will trigger off one of your Fabled monster's effects. Fabled Diff is a light attribute fiend type level 3 with 1400 attack and 1700 defense. When a Fabled monster is sent from the hand to the graveyard, except during a damage step, you can attribute this card then to one of those monsters and special summon it. It's a decent card for a level 3 monster. It has quite balanced attack and defense, and provided a Fabled monster is sent from the hand to the graveyard, so that includes any sort of discards, you're able to just tribute this card and recover one of those monsters, so it's a way of getting something that's more useful than this. Fabled Galabas is a light attribute fiend type effect monster, level 4 with 1500 attack and 800 defense. You can discard 1 card to the graveyard, then attack 1 monster your opponent controls with defense less than or equal to this card's attack, destroy that target. The discard cost is the same as most of the fabled monsters, and they will then trigger off their effects. However, you are able to destroy an opponent's monster who happens to have defense equal to this card's attack, so that's 1,500 or less. But the nice thing about this is it's not based on its original attack, so if you were to boost this card's attack up, it could then hit higher targets. It also needs to consider that there are monsters out there, boss monsters, that have very unbalanced stats. Therefore, they might have high attack points, but very disappointing defense points, making it more susceptible to being destroyed by this card's effect. Fabled Grimro is a light attribute fiend type effect monster. It's a level 4 with 1,700 attack and 1,000 defense. If you control a fabled monster, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. Add a fabled monster from your deck to your hand, except Fabled Grimro. This is a rotor for the deck, but unlike something such as Elemental Hero Stratos, which has to be summoned to use its effect, this is a simple discard from your hand. That means you're not wasting your normal or special summons, and you're not having to run additional cards to get that search. It also has decent attack points for a level 4. A Fabled Cruise is a light attribute fiend type effect monster. It's a level 2 with 1,000 attack and 800 defense. If this card is discarded to the graveyard, target one other level 4 or lower Fabled monster in your graveyard. Special summon that target. This is simply, as soon as it's discarded, able to revive a level 4 or lower Fabled monster, and that comes from the graveyard. It's an instant type of monster reborn for some of the weaker Fabled monsters. Fabled Kushano is a light attribute fiend type tuner effect monster. It's level 3 with 1,100 attack and 800 defense. If this card is in your graveyard, you can discard one Fabled monster to the graveyard except Fabled Kushano. Add this card to your hand. This is able to, provided it's in the graveyard, when a discard happens with a fabled monster, recover itself back to the hand. It's a shame it doesn't come back to the field as it's a tuner. It would help to go into an instant synchro summon, but I think that'd be far too much, and there are ways within the deck that already enable you to do this by special summoning the card. Fabled Leviathan is a light attribute fiend type synchro effect monster. It's a level 10 with 3,000 attack and 2,000 defense. It needs a Fabled tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters, and when this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target up to 3 Fabled monsters in your graveyard and add them back to your hand. This, I believe, is one of the main boss monsters for the archetype, but it doesn't really do much of itself. It's more that when it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, it can be by battle or by card effect. You can recover 3 Fabled monsters from the graveyard straight back to the hand, so it does bring back the resources almost that have been used to bring this card out in the first place. Seems a bit silly. It would have been nice if it had a little bit of a bonus effect to maybe destroy a card randomly or to have some sort of protection. Otherwise, it's more so a 3,000 attack beatstick. Fabled Luri is a light attribute fiend type level 1 with 200 attack and 400 defense. If this card is discarded to the graveyard, special summon it. Therefore, it's really decent as a card, as it's a very small monster, but it can use as part of a synchro material for a synchro summon. The discard on it comes to you at no cost. Fabled Marcosia is a light attribute fiend type level 4 with 1,700 attack and 0 defense. If this card is in your hand, you can discard up to 2 monsters except Fabled Marcosia, but including another Fabled monster, and if you do, special summon this card. If summoned this way, this card gains 200 attack for each monster discarded. If this card is discarded to the graveyard, add one Fabled spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Fabled Marcosia once per turn. This is a level 4 monster with 1,700 attack points, which is quite decent. As soon as this card is in your hand, you're able to discard up to 2 monsters, except itself, but including another Fabled monster. Therefore, you need at least 1 additional Fabled monster to discard. This card then gets special summoned. When it's summoned this way, it gains 200 attack for each monster discarded. So if you manage to discard 2 cards, this card becomes a 2,100 attack level 4 monster. If this happens to be discarded to the graveyard by any means, you can then search for a Fabled spell or trap card from the deck straight to the hand. So it's like a rotor, but in a spell and trap format. Fabled Mitochi is a light attribute fiend type tuner effect monster. It's a level 2 with 400 attack and 200 defense. You can send this card from your hand to graveyard, then target one tuner Fabled monster you control. That monster is treated as a tuner while face up on the field. This card itself is a tuner monster, but given that certain other monsters are higher levels and maybe you need some of those to be treated as tuners, it means that you can go into some of your high level synchro monsters, such as the level 10, without having to use 2 too many resources. You're effectively transferring the tuner status of this card over to another monster. Fabled Ultra is a light attribute fiend type tuner effect monster. It's a level 2 with 800 attack and 500 defense. Once per turn, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard. Special summon one level 3 Fabled monster from your hand. This is another tuner monster, so that's fine. It's part of the archetype. Each turn, you're able to just send a card from the hand to the graveyard, and you can straight away special summon a level 3 Fabled monster. There are other monsters who are able to do this, and so even just through this effect, you can bring out a level 6 synchro, as this will already be in the field, and I'm assuming you're going for a level 3 non-tuner monster. It is very specific to the level and it being within archetype, but there must be reasons behind that. Fabled Raging is a light attribute fiend type synchro effect monster. It's a level 5 with 2300 attack and 1800 defense. It needs a Fabled tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. And when this card is synchro summoned, you can draw until you have 2 cards in your hand. The design on this card is really, if you've used all your resources in your hand, you have no form of recovery. It allows you to draw up to 2 cards, provided you have nothing already in the hand. It's a simple enough effect. It's a 2300 attack monster. I don't think you can expect too much more from this style of monster. Although saying that, it's also a decent starting point to go into some of the higher level monsters once its effect has been used. Fabled Raven is a light attribute fiend type tuner effect monster. It's a level 2 with 1300 attack and 1000 defense. Its effect is once per turn you can discard any number of cards, and if you do, this card gains 1 level and 400 attack for each discarded card until the end of this turn. This is the preferred tuner monster you want to go for within most of the archetype. The reason for that is it's able to adjust its levels upwards, and it also gains a boost in attack points. The discard works within the Fabled archetype to recover certain cards and special some other cards to the field, or recover those cards back to the hand. It means it's much easier for you to go into higher level synchro monsters without having to have multiple monsters on the field. Fabled Sulcius is a light attribute fiend type effect monster. It's a level 6 with 2200 attack and 2100 defense. If this card is in your graveyard, you can send 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard except Fabled Sulcius, special summon this card. It has an instant revival effect when it's in the graveyard. Sending 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard is fine, as they have effects that will be propped off of those discards, and therefore it's almost like having no cost to you. This gets revived and you will use it as part of the basis of a synchro summon. Fabled Topi is a light attribute fiend type level 1 with 500 attack and 200 defense. If your opponent has 2 more cards in their hand than you do, you can reveal 1 Fabled monster in your hand and attribute this face-up card. Then target 2 spell trap cards your opponent controls, destroy those targets. It's a little bit specific as to what it needs to do in order to meet its effect requirement. Firstly, your opponent has to have 2 more cards in their hand than you do. Easy enough to do, as the archetype runs around discarding cards and maybe you're not able to recover those cards. You also have to reveal a Fabled monster in your hand as well as tribute this card to then have the opportunity to target 2 spell trap cards your opponent controls and destroy those targets, and it has to be 2 spell and traps. It's not up to 2. Therefore, if your opponent only has 1, this effect does not work. You can't use it. It seems a lot to be able to negate, and it's not advisable to use it as the quote-unquote spell and trap destroyer. It's better to run things such as Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, Heavy Storm. Any of those types of examples will be a much better place than this in-archetype card. Fabled Rostros is a light attribute fiend type effect monster. It's a level 4 with 1500 attack and 200 defense. While you have 2 or less cards in your hand, all face-up Fabled monsters you control gain 400 attack points. It's a very standardized type of effect. The 400 boost is welcome, as it's a way of just straight up increasing all of your monsters. It's not specifically just this card, and obviously the more Fabled monsters you have on the field, the more on-board damage you can do to the opponent. Think of if you combine this with the field spell, I think it's Luminous Spark. which supports light attribute decks. That gives your monsters that happen to be light attributes an additional 500 attack points. Pair the two together and all of your light attribute monsters that happen to be all fabled will get a nice 900 point attack boost. Fabled Valkyries is a light attribute fiend synchro effect monster. It's a level 8 with 2900 attack and 1700 defense. It needs a fabled tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters. And once per turn, you can discard one fiend monster to draw one card. I don't know what's the reason behind all of these cards. It seems a lot to do with adding draw consistency. A lot of it comes down to the fact that you're using resources and discarding cards to bring other monsters out, and therefore maybe that is the purpose of why you have to draw these additional cards. It is able to do it more effectively than the level 5 synchro, as that has to meet a specific condition of you having no cards in your hand or being able to draw up to 2 when it's synchro summoned. This is more powerful as you can determine it each and every turn, and it's a consistent draw effect. The Fabled Avank is a light attribute beast type tuner effect monster. It's a level 2 with 1000 attack and 600 defense. If this card is in your graveyard, you can discard one Fabled monster, and if you do, special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use this effect of the Fabled Avank once per turn. Provided this card is in the graveyard just by discarding a Fabled monster, you're able to bring this card back. It being a tuner can be used as part of the play for a synchro monster, but when it's used, when it leaves the field in any way, including when it's used as part of that synchro summon, it has to be banished, which makes it more difficult to get back. The Fabled Catsith is a light attribute beast type tuner effect monster. It's a level 1 with 800 attack and 600 defense. If this card is discarded to the graveyard, target one face-up card on the field, destroy that target. It's a simple destruction-based effect. I wish it would just destroy anything, but it has to be a face-up card on the field. So you do have the benefit of targeting either a face-up monster, spell or trap card, but it can't do the equivalent for any of the face-down cards. The Fabled Cerberil is a light attribute beast type tuner effect monster. It's a level 2 with 1000 attack and 400 defense. If this card is discarded to the graveyard, special summon it. It being a tuner monster, it's quite useful, as even when it's discarded for the cost, it's instantly able to special summon itself, so the other card that you use as its effect gets to do that for free. The Fabled Chawa is a light attribute beast type tuner effect monster, level 1 with 200 attack and 100 defense. During your main phase, you can activate this effect, discard one Fabled monster, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. It's an instant access tuner monster, and it only requires a discard. It can be activated, so it's pretty simply a decent effect as it activates from the hand. The Fabled Garnacia is a light attribute beast type level 3 with 1600 attack and 1000 defense. If this card is discarded to the graveyard, special summon it. If summoned this way, it gains 200 attack, but banish it when it leaves the field. This, when it's discarded, gets to instantly be summoned to the field, and it becomes a 1800 attack monster. Only downside is if it happens to leave the field by any means, it gets banished, and therefore it's more difficult to recover from that banished pile. Similar to the Apank, which is that beaver-looking creature that is a tuner monster, and is understandable why, when it's revived, that also has to be banished. The Fabled Cockataur is a light attribute beast type effect monster. It's a level 4 with 1700 attack and 1500 defense. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can discard one Fabled monster and draw one card. For a level 4, it's around the same as a couple of other cards, 1700 attack points, and it also means it's quite easy for it to destroy an opponent's monster. It does rely heavily, therefore, on the battle phase, as if this attack is not able to go through onto a monster, or that monster has immunity from being destroyed by battle, then the effect does not get to trigger. But if it does trigger, not only are you discarding a Fabled monster, which will have its own effect, but you're able to draw an additional card, adding to your consistency. The Fabled Kudabi is a light attribute beast type synchro effect monster. It's a level 4 with 2200 attack and 1100 defense. It needs a Fabled tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. This card gains the following effect based on the number of cards in your hand. 0, it cannot be destroyed by battle card effects, and 3 or more once per turn during the end phase to destroy this card. The design on this card emphasizes having as minimal cards in your hand as possible and using those resources, even if it means setting those cards onto the field, so you don't have the secondary ability that self-implodes this card. First ability provides immunity from being destroyed by battle or card effects. It still is susceptible to other forms of removal, such as compulsory evacuation device. You've got Dimensional Prison, you've got various other cards, such as the Cashteras, which like to banish monsters. I believe that's Cashtera Fenrir. But it's at least decent for a stall card. The Fabled Nazuchi is a light attribute beast type level 2 with 1200 attack and 800 defense. Its effect is, during your main phase, you can discard one Fabled monster, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. When this card is special summoned this way, you can special summon one level 2 or lower Fabled monster from your hand. This, during the main phase, is able to just discard a Fabled monster and special summon itself from the hand. If this has happened successfully, you're then able to bring out another level 2 or lower Fabled monster, and it helps to go into some of your synchro plays. The Fabled Pegasus is a light attribute beast type tuner effect monster. It's a level 1 with 100 attack and 1600 effects. When this card is discarded to the graveyard, you can special summon it in a face down defense position. When this card is flipped face up, you can reveal one Fabled monster in your hand, send one Fabled monster from your deck to the graveyard. If this card is discarded, it just gets to straight away special summon itself in face down defense position. Since it's got 1600 defense points, that's probably more ideal. It is a tuner monster, so it can be used as part of a synchro play. And as soon as this card is flipped face up, which it could do when it's attacked, or when you flip it yourself, by revealing a Fabled monster in your hand, you're able to just send a Fabled monster from your deck to the graveyard. This will Foolish Burial a particular monster in your archetype, which can probably be easier accessed from the graveyard than to search from it from the deck. The Fabled Ruby Ruder is a light attribute beast type tuner effect monster. It's a level 4 with 1100 attack and 800 defense. When this face-up card you control is selected as an attack target, you can discard one Fabled monster to negate the attack. This effect isn't a once per turn effect, so as long as you have other Fabled monsters in your hand, each time it's attacked, you can use the discard effect. This I liken to something like Creebles, which when it's attacked, you have to pay 800 life points to negate that attack, and that's also a tuner monster. By preserving these tuner monsters on the field, you're then able to go into your synchro monsters on your next turn. The Fabled Unicorn is a light attribute beast type synchro effect monster. It's a level 4 with 2300 attack and 1000 defense. It requires a Fabled tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. While you and your opponent have the same number of cards in hand, negate all cards and effects activated by your opponent, and if you do, destroy those cards. I have faced off against some Fabled players and have typically forgotten that we have the same number of cards in hand. This has meant that all the things that I've tried to do against the opponent have then been negated and destroyed, so it is quite difficult to get around. Saying that, it is only a 2300 attack monster, and there are plenty of ways to remove this before you get yourself to having an even balance between yours and your opponent's hand. Fabled Treason is a normal trap card. Its effect is to target one Fabled monster in your graveyard and one face-up card on the field. Discard one card, and if you do, special summon that monster from your graveyard, and if you do that, destroy that card on the field. You can only activate one Fabled Treason per turn. The design on this card is very useful for the deck. By targeting a Fabled monster in your graveyard, you can then choose a face-up card on the field. It does come at a discard cost, but the Fabled monsters like being discarded. You can then special summon that monster from your graveyard, the one that you've chosen, and destroy the other card that's face-up on the field. It seems like a combination type of play, as you will be able to activate multiple types of effects, but it also poses the risk of disrupting whatever your opponent's trying to do. Stairway to a Fabled Realm is a field spell card. When this card is activated, you can send one Fabled monster from your deck to graveyard. You can target one Fabled monster in your graveyard, discard 2 cards, and if you do, add that monster to your hand. You can only use this effect of Stairway to a Fabled Realm once per turn. If your Fabled monster attacks an opponent's monster and you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, the monster gains attack equal to the difference in the number of cards times 200 during damage calculation only. You can only activate one Stairway to a Fabled Realm per turn. When this card is activated, given it's their field spell, you can just send a Fabled monster from your deck to graveyard, so that card can often be recovered more easily from the graveyard than from the deck. choose a fabled monster in your graveyard by discarding 2 cards to help trigger off their effects. You can then add that chosen monster from your graveyard back to your hand, so it acts as a form of recovery. But this can only be done when this card is initially activated. So unless you can, for example, Giant Trunade it back to your hand and then reactivate it maybe during your next turn, there aren't too many applications for that first part of the effect. The other effect relies on you having less cards in your hand than your opponent. If you are down to 0 cards and your opponent has a full hand, say 5-6 cards, then the difference will boost your fabled monsters by 1,200 attack points. But it only happens if your fabled monster attacks an opponent's monster, and that's when it attacks and not is attacked. It's only during your battle phase when you conduct that, not when your opponent does. Otherwise, it would have been more reasonable. That consists the whole list on the archetype for the fabled monsters. As you can see, they're synchro monsters. The 3 of them rely heavily on recovery and drawing into cards. None of them really disrupt the opponent. Even amongst all of the other cards you have, they don't do too much to disrupt what your opponent does and only really helps to benefit your strategy. That can be a significant disadvantage, so I'm hoping from the brand new support, which we're anticipating to happen hopefully by the end of the year, maybe beginning of next year, to get something that is a few more synchro monsters to provide more variety, some disruption, some additional effects, better tuner monsters. I know you've got some decent ones, some more recovery cards, as that's what they're missing. They do have draw cards, but even those are quite specific, and perhaps a few spell or trap cards, even an upgraded version of the field spell to make the deck look a little bit more consistent. Whatever you think, I'd love to hear your opinions of this archetype down below in the comments. Whether you like it or not, I'd love to hear your opinions. Make sure to like the video, it really helps support the channel, and it'd be great if you could subscribe. Thank you.